I noticed some of the clothes come from Bangladesh, and I myself have been there, and I think it's beautiful that these companies are supporting local women. Could you just explain the difference between a sweatshop and like a sewing centre that's supporting these women?
Yeah. So one of my labels that I buy from at the moment, Bakara, which is the one that designed her with the maxi skirt, Bakara is, to me, what fashion should be like. It should be like, it's so beautiful, and it adds so much more meaning to your wardrobe, to what you buy and to what you spend your money on. And she's just an inspiration to me, that label. So Bakara started off with a designer. She was volunteering at the Jago Foundation in Bangladesh, which is a free, of course, school for the children in the slums of Bangladesh. And as she was working there, she was noticing that there were a lot of women, a lot of single mothers, working extremely long hours with really young families. So they weren't spending their time with their children because they were working so long to support their kids. And these children at such a young age were just left on their own, and a lot of them ended up in street gangs and with a lot of depression problems, and they weren't really coping as well. So she kind of realised that the problem was with that the women, because they weren't getting paid very much and were forced to work such long hours, there needed to be employment for them where they could be offered hours that were decent, like hours that we would work here in Australia, and a wage that I think she pays them 3 times more, I think, than the government recommendation in Bangladesh. So they're getting more money for less hours, which is fair. In Bangladesh, I think there's a huge problem because with the garment factories over there, they're so unregulated by the government. So there's not many health and safety regulations at the moment. It's also the cheapest wage as well. So there's been a huge boom over in Bangladesh where a lot of brands, Western brands particularly, move their manufacturing and production over to Bangladesh because they can cut corners and they can increase their profit margins and lower the prices for consumers to become more competitive by kind of taking advantage of these people who are already in vulnerable situations. And I think because of that, you see tragedies like the Rana Plaza factory collapse. A lot of their factories over in Bangladesh, they're not made to be factories. They're not, the infrastructure isn't made to support the heavy machinery and the thousands of people. So there's often going to be problems like that in Bangladesh. And I think as well, things like fire safety isn't considered in the factories. There's often bars on the windows, and I think it was in December last year that there was a fire factory where 112 people were trapped in the building and died because they couldn't get out of the building. So I think with sweatshops over there, there's not a lot of thought and consideration into the people who are working and making the garment factories, and there's a lot of pressure as well from companies for the brands to they're sending them such huge orders that they can't really fulfill in the time frames that they're supposed to. So a lot of the time they're being forced to work overtime, and they don't often get overtime paid for that as well. And I did watch another documentary a few weeks ago where there were, in some cases, child labour being used in Bangladesh, and these kids weren't attending school anymore, they were just working. So it's very sad that it's come to this, and that it's so out of control. For me, I always got onto sustainable fashion more from an environmental perspective. As I started researching it, I found all these unethical stories and this unethical side of the industry, and I was so surprised and shocked that this still happens. And I honestly didn't think it's such a huge scale as well. I thought maybe it might happen, but in some really dodgy company or something like that, not companies that you and I probably bought from in the past. That is.
It's a problem because companies today aren't transparent. So you only see the advertisements and all the pretty things about it, and they hide everything in the background, so you just don't know.
Yeah, and the supply chains are so long and complicated as well, and there's so many people in between, so that when a disaster does occur, they can really distance themselves from it, and they don't get held accountable for it as well. So with the Rana Plaza factory collapse, I think over 1,000 people died, and then even more of them are injured. So there's so many families and people that are not working anymore, and they haven't received any income or support for it. So they're really struggling to feed their families and move forward from it.